Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on the SLEIS user interface. This is our second webinar in a series of 4 training webinars on the state and local emission inventory system that Oklahoma DEQ has, replacing the Redbud online emissions inventory reporting system. I am Carrie Schroeder, the emissions inventory manager. You will also hear from Joshua Kalfas today. By the way, we have everyone muted, and if you have any questions, please use the chat feature in GoToMeeting to type those in, and we will answer them throughout. We've got some breaks established throughout our webinar today. So on today's agenda, we will show you how you can navigate to and start your annual inventory or report. Those are synonymous terms. And how you can add new records to your inventory, such as a new emission unit and all of the associated records with that. We'll show you how you can report on existing records, which you'll need to report your annual throughput, your hours, and your emissions. We will also show you how you can send your report through validation, which is a necessary step before you can submit. And we will go over how you can request to amend a previous report. We no longer have the turnaround documents that you may have been used to. You will be doing amendments through SLEIS, so it's an electronic amendment process. With that, I will hand it off to Joshua Kalfas.
Hey everybody, my name is Joshua Kalfas. As Carrie said, I'm with the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality's Infrastructure Management and Program Services Group. I'm here today to assist with the initial introduction of SLEIS to everyone and their use. I'm going to be going over how it works, what you all need to be doing, and what fun you'll have. So, standard caveat I sometimes say really dumb stuff during presentations. If I do, just ignore that part. Even in the recordings, just ignore that part. As Carrie said, we're going to be stopping for, not really stopping, but I will be stopping the presentation part every so often to take questions in between specific sections of the demonstration. But we will be running straight through this entire presentation because it is a lot of material and we have an hour and a half to cover it in. So to start off, for those of you who have no idea where you're coming from, you're going to be reporting your annual emissions inventories through SLEIS. Stands for State and Local Emissions Inventory System. Grant Loney, he gave a presentation, I believe about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that was just posted today. It was a recorded presentation discussing how users would go in, make sure that they have all the information they have for accessing their accounts, the various facilities and companies they're supposed to be reporting for. If you have questions about that material, I suggest going to view that presentation because it's all covered there. I will be covering specifically all of the user interface transactions. We will not be covering any content about any of the bulk transactions or any of the template used today. That will be in the subsequent presentation, which is happening later this week. When you want to begin your reporting, you could navigate to OKDEQ. If you don't know where that's at, type it in the search bar and you'll get us. From our agency's homepage, you can navigate to Air Quality's Emission Inventory Group. Now you have to forgive me if I do get a little bit ahead. There's a slight lag between what I'm looking at and what you see. So I'll try to go slow. I haven't had any coffee, so it should be okay. Once you're at the Emissions Inventory webpage, you can see in the top highlighted bar the State and Local Emissions Inventory System. Click on the link. It should take you to our website. This is the landing page for SLEIS. On it, you can see a few things. There's a nice big happy welcome. Some notes. On the right hand in the bar, there's news. It's usually not that exciting news. It's just news. On the lower half of the screen with the links are some important pieces of information I want to point out. One is that any questions you have will always be going to the air emissions staff. You can email them or call them. There's also places within the application that I'll cover that you can contact the emission inventory staff through. This material was covered by Grant previously, so down here on this selection under SLEIS supporting documentation, you'll notice that there is a SLEIS facility application guide. Everything I'm going to be covering here today, most of that will be covered in the facility application guide. I'll be covering some additional quirks and stuff about the system, but if you were to download the facility application guide by itself and read that, you have all the information you need to do reporting. Below that is a SLEIS code tables. It's an Excel workbook which has all tables of reference sets or code set information used across the application. And then below that are two files that we'll be covering next time, the batch and the individual facility import files and their specifications and how to use those. Below that are the standard links which also appear on the DEQ webpage, regulated air pollutants, FAQs, links to the NAICS, SIC, SEC, and AP42 reference material, and then a cute little guide for oil and gas facilities on determining what kind of facility you are when you report to us. Once you're here and you're ready to go, you can click log in. Now, if you've forgotten your password, you can always say, oh, it's been a year since I've been in here, I need to reset my password. You come in here and you type in your email. If for some reason you think you have an account with us and you do not, when you type in your email address, if it is not within the system, it's going to say, hey, you don't have an account or it's been deactivated. You would automatically want to contact us to get everything set up. But I have an account, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm not Bob, go ahead and log in. And once I log in, I'm going to land on the My Companies page. All users for Oklahoma will be assigned at least a view role for the company that they work with for all facilities they may be associated with. So everyone should be landing on this page. There are some unlikely instances where a contractor may be working for someone and only has access to a singular facility at a company. If that was the case, they will land on something slightly different, but I'll show you that in just a second. When you do land on the My Companies page, you can see every single company your account, you as a user, has any association to. Today, we're going to be working with this third one, Tesco DEQ. I can also see my company roles. I think Grant covered this previously, so I'm not going to go into that. On the right hand, there are two buttons. I can either open the Tesco DEQ company, or I can go to the batch reporting process section. I'm going to be focusing on just directly navigating to the suite of facilities and reporting there. Now, one thing I do want to show you right now, because this was a question early on in registration for the webinars, is if you're coming in and you have no idea what facilities you're needing to report, what's an easy way to tell? If you click this button, you can view all facilities that have any reporting requirement based on the year that is selected. Here it defaults to the most current year. You can see all past years that are loaded into the application. If I was to choose 2018, it would reload the facilities that had previously reported. But if you're wanting to know what facilities need to be reported for this year, there's an easy way to tell. Everything should show up in this window. And going back and navigating with the other button to the list of facilities related to my company, I can see all facilities, regardless of what year they're reported in, that have been loaded into the application. So if I have a facility that only reported in 2013 and stopped reporting then, it would appear here. All facilities that we know about from the years 2013 through now, 2019. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a type of anchor for your navigation. Here you can see information about the company, your roles at this company. You can also see who else is here with a role of the company. And then you can navigate to the specific facilities. We're going to be using this facility today. demonstration. I also see that this facility, I have a submitter and viewer role. The facility below it is only viewer, et cetera, through all the other facilities. Now, if I was a consultant, or maybe one of the other cases where I do not land on the My Company's page, I'm going to land on a page which is My Facilities. On that page, it will list all of the facilities I've been associated with. It will look something similar to this. Once you have chosen which facility you want to work with through the front of the application, let's say you're ready to go, you've gotten all of your information together, and now you're wanting to come in and do your reporting, maybe not submit it, but just start the reporting. You just choose which facility you would like to open. It will take you to all years that have previously been identified as a report for that facility. Here you can see I've submitted 2013 through 2018 for this facility, and I'd like to start my 2019 report. It's never been submitted, and it has not yet been started. The first thing that you must do to begin your reporting process is you must start the report by hitting this little play button. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen on this page, you can see a little bit more information. You can see not only the information about the company, but also some information about the facility and any users who have been assigned to this specific facility. Again, users is covered by grant in an earlier presentation. We'll be going into that here. So I'm going to go ahead and start the report for this facility. When I do, it's going to take it just a second to load, and then it's going to land on this page. Whenever you are at an individual report page for any year, for any facility, this is how it appears. On the top row, you have something called the facility inventory, where you can edit information about the facility and create or edit information about release points, control devices, emission units, and unit processes. Below that is another row where you can report information about your process emissions and attach any supplemental documentation that you wish. We don't require this. If you do, it's optional. It's totally up to you, but there's no requirement in Oklahoma to append any kind of supplemental documentation to your report. Again, on the right-hand side, if you scroll down a bit, you can also see that now you have access to certain reports. This facility has never been submitted, so there is not yet a report for you to view here. But you can see that there is a report. The unredacted version of the report is available, and this is just the information that exists within the application right now. It would be considered your copy of record. So whatever data was preloaded into the application or anything that you've already entered in as you go is always immediately accessible through this link here, and it will give you the unredacted version. Anything that CBI would be included. And then over here, you could print the report and also obtain it that same way. If I were to click that right now, it's just going to generate a PDF copy. I can open that, and it will show you what's previously existing before you even start reporting within the system. Any information that you reported in a prior year will propagate forward to populate information in the current reporting year, assuming that it should have. It's not something that's been permanently shut down. Some other reports down here, you can view total emissions by facility. So if you want to see a facility-wide summary of emissions for NOx, CO, etc. Total emissions by emission unit. It will aggregate all emissions across all processes specific to the unit. And then total emissions by release point. Let's say that you have numerous processes all being released at a singular point. It would aggregate the emissions to that. Final one is a process emissions by summary. It's only available as CSV. It's because it's a large flat file of information. It's kind of hard to look at if it's not in a CSV. However, scrolling up, we're going to start off with the facility button. Now, similar to Redbud, much of the information about a facility cannot be edited by you, but it is presented to you. If you wish to amend certain information about a facility that you see, always contact DEQ. It may be the permitting staff, or it may be the emissions inventory staff. It really depends on the piece of information you're wanting to change. Frequently, though, it's going to be permitting. Here you can see that when I first open up the facility button and arrive at these tabs, there's 5 tabs, and I can edit. When I land, it is not going to assume that I wish to edit immediately. I can come in here and view the information across the tabs, but I'm not going to automatically edit. What I'm going to do is go ahead and jump into edit mode so you can see everything. I can be able to show you a little bit more. When I begin editing, the fields that I am not permitted to amend aren't accessible by users. So for instance, the identifiers, the company name, the facility name, those could be changed by you. The names could, but you'd have to contact DEQ. However, something like the operating status, the date that the operating status occurred, those things can be changed. All of these small green buttons will bring up helpful information about the field. For instance, this is just the number assigned to the facility by DEQ. And then on status date, you can see that there's a conditional requirement whenever reporting specific statuses. So we're going to report this facility is operating. There's no need for me to change anything here. The contacts tab is not a tab of information you have to worry about. All of the information about a contact, all the information about the contacts exists at the individual user record. Addresses, this is for the facility. You can see that we're located here. If you ever want to drop us a Christmas card or location information, the latitude and longitude is only collected in decimal degrees, and you do not have the ability to indicate certain metadata about the latitude and longitude. However, all of this must be changed by DEQ staff, so you'd want to let us know if any changes needed here. Finally, additional information. For oil and gas facilities, you would indicate what type of oil and gas facility you may be. Permit numbers for your facility would automatically populate. If you have any API US well numbers for wellhead facilities, you would indicate those here by just including the 10-digit number, separated by a comma and space if you have multiple wells. The SIC number is pre-populated, but if you need to make a change, that is possible. And you'll notice that any little field with a red bar next to it is a field of required information. I'm not required to submit any kind of API number, but all facilities must make a designation of whether or not they are one of these specific oil and gas facilities, or if it's just not applicable to you. We're going to go ahead and make one. We're going to just toss in a value because I feel like it. So for this tab, there isn't as much information that needs to be filled out as compared to other tabs. Facility is fairly simple. Once I'm done making any changes I wish, I may save. And we'll get a note saying that the save was successful. Now, the save and cancel still persist on the screen because you're still in the editing mode. If you were to, after saving, hit cancel, it's not going to undo the save you have already committed. So just keep that in mind. Once I'm done with a facility, I can hit the in process back button and go to release points. Now, the workflow I'm going to be going through right now is from left to right. Facility, followed by release points, followed by control devices, followed by emission units and unit processes. You don't have to follow this flow. However, it is helpful because when you wish to report information about a unit process, it's going to be tying together those things that you've created at the release point, control device, or emission unit. What might be more comfortable for a lot of you, especially having recorded and rendered before, is to create first your emission unit, then your control device, then your release point, or perhaps your emission unit, then your release point, and then your control devices. It's really up to you, but always be sure that you have these 3 completed prior to attempting any unit processes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into release points. Well, actually, before I do that, let me just stop real quick. Does anybody have a question about what I've covered so far? Oh, it looks like someone does. No, I cannot make you the presenter. Another one is, what is the process for adding new facilities and getting new facility ID numbers if we cannot make changes directly to SLEIS, in SLEIS? Good question. So all of the information that's loaded into SLEIS is based on the assumption that we know of your reporting requirement. There's only 2 ways that can happen. Either we were notified by compliance and enforcement here within our agency, or by permitting. Once they tell us, that facility would be loaded into SLEIS for emissions inventory reporting. One of the assumptions is that you've already gone through the permit process or are in the permit process. The other one is that we have discovered it through compliance and enforcement, some kind of action there, and it would be loaded for you. So as long as the things upstream of us are happening like they should be, it would be loaded and appearing here for you. Now, I will caveat that with, if someone has forgotten to timely report to us some information like a transfer of ownership or some other kind of change in company name or whatever else, we won't have that. We don't know until we're told about it. But again, all of the upstream things with permitting and compliance enforcement should be handled. That's how it'll show up. Oop, didn't want to do that. All right, so that was the only question. I'm going to go ahead and jump into release point. All right, so what I'm going to do to show you more functionality, I'll come back to this other stuff later, but just showing you an add is the easiest way to cover some of the material. So I'm going to add a new release point. When I do, you can see that it has not yet given an identifier because no one knows one yet, but the system will eventually. And I can choose a lot of the same information that appeared in Redbud. So what type of vent is it? Let me see here. It's going to be a vertical with a rain cap. What's my description? This is for building A. Whoops. ENGI engine. All right, so building a diesel engine test cell 1 stack. It is going to be operating. I scroll down and I'm going to fill out some information about the stack. Now, if I were to choose a different type of release point, if I was to choose fugitive, it's going to ask me somewhat different information. No, that's not what I want. Somewhat different information. For fugitive, it's going to ask me fugitive height, fugitive width, length, and angle. This is something that's different from what appeared in Redbud. We used to have it where it was a height and area. Height, still the same thing, height. Width and length is going to be different now. On the upload of information into SLEIS, we had to take the existing area and try to transform that into a length and width. Because of some funkiness with the values we had, and some people giving us really, really strange values, you're going to want to review the fugitive width and length for your facility at all of your fugitives to make sure it actually makes sense, it reflects reality. Fugitive angle is a new value. I'm going to tell you right now that you can go in wherever you see this and just put in 0. You don't need to worry about it. The reason why is because EPA will soon be changing this and it will become meaningless anyway. So going back up and changing it back to what I was going to do, vertical with rain cap. And completing the information. Give me 1 second to put this in. 25, it is circular. If I was to choose rectangular, it would ask me for both length and width. The diameter is in feet, so I'm going to say it is 6 inches or half a foot. gas exit temperature is 1,228. The flow rate is 103. Now I'm going to choose actual cubic feet per minute. And when I do, and then go to this next field, it will automatically calculate exit gas velocity for me. It also works in reverse. If I knew the exit gas velocity and chose feet per minute or feet per second, it would automatically calculate that value and input the correct units. Comment. You can comment here if you would like. It's not required. Location information is quite a bit different from how it was in Redbud. It's going to be a lot more convenient for many people. Each release point has to have a location. In Redbud, it was that the emission unit was assigned that value. Well, it's not that way in SLEIS. The release point where the emissions are actually being emitted to the atmosphere is more important. And so location is assigned here at the release point. If you wish to use the facility lap and lawn that you've reported, you simply click this button and everything goes away. Then that value will be used here. However, if there's some reason that you want DEQ to know what the specific release point lap lawn is, you would uncheck that box, complete the information, and then include the metadata if you know it. Again, metadata fields are not required, but it is preferred. It helps us make more sense of what you report. I'm going to check the box. There is no additional information for release points. So once you've completed your location and your release point information, hit save. And if you go back, you can see that the newly added release point shows up on the list. Going to the next part of my new thing I'm adding, I'm going to add control devices. Now this is a significant difference from Redbud. In Redbud, control devices were always considered an attribute of the pollutant emissions. That is not the case for SLEIS. Within SLEIS, all of the control devices are considered individual objects. That gives you the ability to have a singular control device exist for several emission units. It makes it a little bit more flexible. So I'm going to add a new control device. The description I'm going to give it, it's going to be a little bit long, but give me 1 second. That's not how you spell particulate. All right, so I'm going to add a diesel PM filter. On this field for control measure, as in several fields within SLEIS, if it is not a selection, such as a drop-down list, you may begin typing in the field, and as you begin typing, it's going to try to predict what you're looking for. Here, I want to do diesel particulate filters, because it's going to be controlling PM, particulate matter, 10. Scroll down a little bit so you can see that better. And a second pollutant, PM 25. Now the percentage that it controls is 78% for both. And notice here that I am not putting anything about the capture efficiency, because that information isn't specific to the control device. That is information that's specific to the process in general. What you're doing here is just characterizing your control equipment, the devices that you're using. I can include a comment if I want. There is no requirement for additional information. So once I've entered in the device type, what it's controlling, and giving it a name, I can hit save. All right, so if I navigate back, I can see the device I've added is now here at the bottom of the list. I want to stop here and see if anybody has any questions real quick before going to the next two. There's one question. If we have been reporting in Redbud previously, will these site details and previous emission points already be populated into SLEIS, or is everyone rebuilding from the ground up? No, they're already populated within SLEIS. We took all of the information for all years from 2013 through 2018 and migrated that to SLEIS, so that will appear for you both for your 2019 reporting and for any amendments that you'd be doing in the past. Now, there's a caution with that in that the information had to be transformed because of the data models being different. For instance, control devices, there's a big difference between the two. I'm actually going to come back to that in a few minutes to show you an example of some of the differences in more detail, but everything will be there for you to see. It looks like that was the only question at the moment. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Emission Unit and do an add there. So if I click on the Add button again, Emission units are very simple, almost exactly like they were in Redbud. So I'm going to, I don't want to do that, yeah. So the type is just what I'm wanting to report. A, B, C, D, E. These are all alphabetical, which is nice. Engine test cell. It is operating, and I am not going to include design capacity here because there's going to be multiple engines in it. If you have an emission unit and it is the only thing there, and you're not rotating something out through a test cell, please indicate the design capacity. There are certain units that can be chosen. There's a few more units that are possible than it previously existed in Redbud. So go ahead and fill it out whenever you can. We would really appreciate that. It's not required because there are cases where design capacity makes no sense. However, where it does, please include that. There's also, I believe, a little bit of conditional requirement here. There are a small number of emission unit types where when it identifies that, it will require that the design capacity is input. I believe it's engines, it's like 5 or 6 of them in total. Additional information, I can input a serial number if I like. Maybe it doesn't have one, I don't know. It's not required though. So once I've added the emission unit, I can save. And move on to the next one. I saw someone else add in a question. I'll go ahead and get that real quick. It says, even if you have several different units with different control devices, if they are similar, does the control device only need to be listed as a single control device or referenced by multiple EUs? For instance, OC engines. If you have each unique device needs to be entered once uniquely. So I will show you that a little bit here in just a second. If you were to think about this in physical reality, if you had 20 different control devices, each one of them controlling individually 20 different emission units, you would report those as individual control devices within SLEIS. You would not want to create one control device and say that it is controlling all of these 20 units. It would just overwhelm the unit to begin with, and people would be really confused by that. So you would create each one of those individually. Okay, so for unit process, go ahead and add this real quick. So I'm going to add a new process. And the reason why you want to ensure that everything that we've just covered has already been completed is because at the process, this is where you tie that stuff together. You can see that I can choose my emission unit identifier, and it's going to give me options from the pre-existing list I've already created. I'm going to choose test cell 1. The SCC, I can either begin typing code or I can try to look up by different level. Either way is fine. If you have no idea, you could always go to the EPA's website and do some searching there. Here it's going to be 20.1, and once you put in the value, it would automatically populate everything else for you. The description, building a diesel engine, test cell 1. It's operating. The last final emission year should only ever be filled out if you wish to no longer see that process show up in the future. This is indicating that I have no emissions to report because 2019 was the last year that anything happened. If it's not, go ahead and leave that blank so you can report it. The control approach, make sure I got all this. Yes. The control approach, you may either say, I am not controlling this at all, and simply check the box and move on. If you do, I think it requires you not done. Just set not control. But if there is a control, you uncheck the box and you give it a name. The reason why is because the control approach description is kind of important. It's an aggregate name. It's a name given to the aggregation of all of the different devices that you're using at this emission unit. So you could say, something like that. Then below that, I can include as many devices as I'd like. Now, I only created one here for the demonstration. There's 2 already existing, and I'm going to show you those. The first device I want exists on the list that we've already created, and that's the PM filter we just did. Sequence is something that's, not only is control devices new, but there's some other information about the attributes of the controls, which is also new within the process. Sequence is a way to tell in what order the control devices are acting on your emission stream. So this is the first control device that is operating on particulate matter. Its capture efficiency is 100%, and it is on 100% of the year. That may be real or not. I'm just making up numbers here at this point. I can add a second one, and I'm going to add the control for ammonia. Now, I could put number 2 here, or I could put number 1. Either value works, and this is very important. The reason why that works in this case is because these controls are operating on completely different pollutants. This is the first control that is controlling particulate matter. This is the first control that is controlling NOx. Even though it's the same stream and it's impossible to branch them off, but that's perfectly fine. I'm also going to add a third one, a DOC. Again, the oxidation catalyst is working on different pollutants, even though it's the same stream and may physically exist third in line. Once I have that done, I can look at release point apportionment. Release point apportionment is something that's also new within SLEIS. This gives you the ability to say, this process is being routed to multiple release points. There's various reasons for this. However, within my test cell, I only have 1 stack. It's all going out. So 100% of it is being apportioned to this release point. There's no additional information required. So once I have completed my control device, my process information, I hit save, and oh, I forgot to do something. Process control. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hold on. 100. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. I was wrong. This is the first time I've been able to do this because it wasn't set up before and I couldn't do it earlier. So you actually do have to have these exist in series for even though they are controlling different pollutants. So the first one, then the second one, then the third one, it's treating it as a stream even though they're operating on different pollutants. Capture and uptime are still 100%. My mistake, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop here and see if there are any other questions. There are not at the moment. Okay. So the last part, once you've created your emission unit, your release point, your control device, your unit process, what does uptime mean? Okay. Sorry, let me jump back to that. Uptime within the process uptime means how much, how long, what period of time during the year your control device actually was up working. So for instance, let's say that you had to operate 8760 every day, all day during the entire year, and you didn't have it operating for a week. Well then, what percentage of that year was your control device actually up and working?
Furthermore, I'll just elaborate on that. That an example of this that we see a lot is that flares at well pad facilities aren't operating all of the year. Maybe the pilot light wasn't lit, and you find out later in the year that it had been down for so long. So you can utilize that uptime percentage to indicate that, and that should be reflected in your emission calculations.
Some of the places that might apply vapor recovery units during maintenance periods, any control device during a maintenance period, if it's something that isn't already explicitly accounted for in your permit and the way you've handled the equipment there. There's another question, would you ever have, no, you would never really have 100% control. You would have 100% capture, and you could have 100%, well, I know, yeah, I know what you're saying. You would never have no emissions, unless you're magic. Which I can be right now because it's my presentation, but you would never in reality have 100% control and capture. All right, so, yeah, I do too. Going back to the process emissions, now for process emissions, you come down to do your process emissions reporting once you have completely done this top row of information. The reason why is because within SLEIS, there's the ability to have the application do a lot of verification and calculation for you based on the information you've provided it above. So for the process emissions, at this one I've just added, it's never been reported before, so I want to add one. Actually, I don't want to add. Let me back up and show you. Well, I'll show you that in a few minutes. So I'm going to, for the process that I created, building A, engine test cell 1, I'm going to begin that information, and you can see that it's brought in information from the previous tabs and buttons we've entered information at. So it has building A, engine test cell for the process identifier. The emission unit identifier, I just gave it the same name to keep it simple. The SCC was already populated based on the information I have. Now, is this process reported? Here, if all of my emissions were below the reporting threshold, I could click this button to uncheck the box. If I do, it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Because if you do, I'm going to delete everything else about all emissions that you've told me before and about your annual throughput, all that stuff, and gray it out. I haven't entered that any here, so I can go ahead and do that. And it would look like this. So there's no need for you to report any operations, any emissions, or the throughput. Now I'm going to go ahead and report my process. So I'm going to check the box and enter that information. Just be careful when you uncheck the box. You cannot undo what you've done. It is not fun to try to fix. So my annual throughput, let me see, what am I doing here? I'm going to do 8,000 gallons. So within SLEIS, one of the things it attempts to help you with is identifying an accurate combination of throughput, type, material, and units for your throughput. This only occurs at certain SCCs or certain process types. It doesn't occur at all of them because it just can't do that. For those cases where it does not have the ability to identify a throughput combination for you, it will only display the throughput units of measure, the throughput type, and the throughput material. You would select those on your own. Here, I have some options. I can choose either distillate oil, heat input, energy output. I'm going to go ahead and use the distillate oil as if I combusted 8,000 gallons of fuel. And I'm also going to report this as CBI, confidential business information, just for example. Now, the CBI that shows up, or the areas where information is CBI, will only show up in any reports on that previous link I showed you that was on the right-hand side toward the bottom on the facility page, where it said facility report unredacted. All other places where CBI is presented, either in the copy of record, in any reports you try to obtain by printing or viewing, it will not display CBI there to you in the PDF document. It only exists within the application and in the explicit case where you want to obtain an unredacted report. Below the CBI box is a large field of supplemental parameters. None of these are required. However, you can enter them if you want. So I'm using ultra low sulfur diesel. I'm going to go ahead and put in a value. I think that's the right value. I might be off by a decimal point, but it's okay for now. The only time any of these fields may become required is if you're using a formula, or SLEIS is using a formula, which accounts for the information found here. It's needing these values as input for that formula to conduct the calculation. If not, it's only optional, and when it is not optional, if you made a mistake, the application will tell you. So I'm done with this one. Now I'm going to go to operations. We work in, let's see, 7, 8, 5, 52. Now, as I tab through these fields, you can see that the actual hours per year are automatically calculated based on the values I put in for days, weeks, and year. If I were to type in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, it's going to 52. Oh, darn it. Sorry, I have to do this. 24, 7, 52. It'll automatically input 8784. Now, if anybody here is really quick with math, you know that that does not equal 8784. That's because in this case, we made the assumption that if you're trying to tell us that you worked all day, every day, the entire year, what you mean for hours is 8784. The years field may be used by SLEIS in certain cases for calculations, and using a value less than 8784 when it was pre-populated might cause some problems for you making sure that you're reporting properly. So this is the only combination where that value breaks from traditional math. being arithmetically correct. But I'm going to go in, like I had, type in what it was, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 2080. Seasonal fractions here are whole numbers. They are not decimals. Once I'm done with that, I can move to emissions. Now, emissions don't exist because I just cleared them out even if they did. So I'm going to add 2. The first one I'm going to add is PM 10 and PM 25. Now, there's not a requirement that I completely fill out information as I add stuff, but if I make a mistake someplace and cannot save, then have to navigate away from this field, that means I will lose all information that I have not saved. That's why it's very important to be sure that you've created all of your emission units for these points and control devices prior to coming to this place. Sorry, I had to get a drink. Okay, so here I am going to use one of the methods from this list. For example, I'm going to use the AP42 emission factor that occurs pre-control. Whenever I try to choose an emission factor from AP42, SLEIS is going to do a lookup to make sure that what I'm attempting to do actually exists within that information set. Here it does, so I can select it. If I was trying to make this selection for a SCC that has no AP42 emission factor, it would give me an error saying, hey, you can't use this because the value doesn't exist. Something else I'd like to point out right here is that the set of methods is significantly different from how it was in Redbud. Not only are there additional methods compared to what existed previously, but how those methods are used is slightly different. An easy place to show you this is with the EPA AP42 factors. Here you see no emission factor, no control, pre-control, and post-control. No emission factor means that no factor exists. It's formula-based. And in any one of those cases where no EF is used, if the formula exists within SLEIS, the application will attempt to use that and call those supplemental parameters that you saw earlier. If I was to attempt to use no control, it's me telling the application, hey, I have no control device at my emission unit, just report the emissions. Don't worry about control devices. Pre-control and post-control are important to use properly because it's telling the application, hi, I have a control device, and the emission factor I'm about to supply you occurs as if it were either before or after my control scenario. AP42 for this value is pre-control. I'm going to select it. Excuse me. And you can see once I made that selection, it's grayed out the fields. I think I hit cancel before. Yeah, I hit cancel before. So once I make the selection, it populates the emission factor field with the units that I've shown earlier and calculates the emissions. I will stop in a moment to answer some questions, but real quick, I'm going to do it for PM 2.5 also. So here, same thing, pre-control. It has the emission factor, the units, and my estimated emissions. You can notice that SLEIS has crazy long precision. You do not need to report out to that length. And our current reporting guidance still stands. If it's a criteria pollutant 0.1 tons or higher, you must report. If it's a half or certain things that are reported as TRI, 0.001 or greater. How far beyond that you go is up to you. I suggest at least 1 or 2 digits personally, just for precision and significant factors. But the application, when it does it on its own, is going to go out all as far as it can. So once I have reported my emissions, I'm just going to pretend that I only have the 2 here. I'll hit save. It's going to run through a quick check. Once I'm done, it will save. So I'm going to stop here for some questions. I'm sure there's probably a few.
We've got a couple questions. The first question is, are glycol dehydration units at oil and gas facilities typically listed as separate release points or separate emission units, or does it depend on how it was set up in Redbud? Shelby Willoughby with the emissions inventory staff is going to answer this question.
So currently, it depends on how it's set up in Redbud. However, you first entered it in Redbud is how it will appear in SLEIS. But the ideal way for glycol dehydrators is we consider them one emission unit with two processes, one process for the still vent, one process for the reboiler. Then it could be one or two release points, depending on the configuration. If the reboiler and still vent both vent to the atmosphere separately, you need two release points. Or if the still vent routes to the reboiler, you only need one release point.
Second question, can we delete processes without requesting DEQ complete the deletion? Meaning deleting a process in Redbud, we used to have a deletion request form. So can we delete processes by unchecking that box under process in SLEIS? No, that is not a mechanism you can use to delete a process. We haven't thoroughly tested deleting records in SLEIS, but I believe if it's existing in there right now, you cannot delete it. So, but if you are adding any new records and you realize that while you're adding them that they are not valid records, you can delete them before submitting to us. But once you submit to us, then that record is there for all of time, probably. We will test that further with this first reporting season. There is a feature in SLEIS, the last emissions year, in which you can indicate that that unit is, or that process is no longer being utilized. Third question, will it flag if you select a controlled or pre-controlled emission factor but don't have a control device in the process path?
The answer to that is not flag in the way that you would hope for, and that's nothing. There's nothing we could do about that right now because that was out of scope for our customization. So if I were to, it will be obvious though when you see it. If I were to go to a process, I'm not sure if I can get this trigger with this one, and happen to choose, where am I at? Let me go to emissions. The completely wrong method and say, oh, it's not controlled. Okay, I'm going to use the same factor. That's cool, whatever. You can see that even though I have the control devices in place and I've indicated that it's not controlled, it's saying, well, you told me there's a control there, so I'm using it. And it's going to say 78% efficiency. There's an easy way, just look at the screen and say, hey, I've said no control, but I put something there. Maybe I should go make sure I did what I did correctly, right? If you were to accidentally choose post control, in this scenario, there's all of the AP42 factors, they don't have post control emission factor values, so it's impossible for you to use. But if you were to make a selection by something from a vendor and at an SEC where it's not graying these out, you're able to put in the emission factor, the units, and then it does the math. If you've made selection of post control, it will twice invoke that control device. Once because the factor you've indicated accounts for those reductions in emissions, and the second time because of the math the application is going to do. That is the only check that currently exists. You creating a device and then choosing, no, I don't really have one, and then it's showing it to you on screen. So yes, definitely be careful about that. There's another question. It says, if you intend to use a post-control emission factor, is it still necessary to enter control approach and efficiency? For instance, I think what you're asking there, you might want to type in whether I got it right or not, is do you need to go in and create the control device and associate it with that process when you report? If that's what you're asking, the answer would be yeah, but I'm not sure if I got your question. So if you're using a post-control emission factor, that implies that you have the control device on site, which should be reported in the application through your emissions inventory report. Maybe that got it. So, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop here for a little bit longer. Are there any other questions before I move on to a little bit more? How are we doing on time? Doing good? Okay. So another thing I wanted to point out to you, so it goes a little bit back to some of the questions about can I make deletions? As Carrie mentioned a second ago, you could see that at the process we just created, you can delete that because you've created it newly and not yet sent it off to us to store forever. However, on another one that existed previously, I made this in a prior year and I cannot delete that one. The best I can do is request a date. Well, you wouldn't even want to do that. If you created something in this scenario for a process, you would just come in, like she mentioned, put in the last inventory year of the last time this thing should show up, and it would not show up anymore past that year. If you notice a huge mistake, something that just is grotesquely incorrect, you can navigate to where that might be. And then over here on the right-hand bar, there's a request a data change link. If you were to click that, it's going to grab some basic information, and you can make the request of, hey, do this, and then give your reasoning or some background information. The emissions inventory staff will receive this. They can review it. They may follow up with some questions, but it's an easy way to contact us at this specific point without having to type as much. For process emissions, you'll notice everything up here is in one row. This is the stuff that goes from year to year to year. And these are the things that you have more difficulty deleting if you find some grotesque error. However, down here for process emissions, even after you've sent us something, you're able to go to the pollutant and remove it by hitting the delete button here. So your suite of pollutants you may report at a process in any single year can be changed at will by you. All right, so going on to a couple of other things. So that's generally the report process. I'm not going to quite yet submit and validate all that stuff because I want to show you a couple of other things. Now, in here for the release point, we created this single release point. You can see in here there were some pre-existing that I reported prior. This one was reported as temporarily shut down. If you come to emission units, you'll also notice that this reciprocating internal combustion engine is also temporarily shut down. If I navigate to processes, no process over here for that emission unit exists because I've indicated that the emission unit and or that related process should not show up here. This screen only shows you those things that you have positively indicated should be reported at one of these other buttons. So if you find yourself arriving at the process emissions page and unable to find the process you're looking for, stop and think to yourself, oh, did I forget to change its operating status? Did I give it a last year of some type? What else am I thinking? Okay, the next thing is for any of you who go into a facility and are changing any of your equipment's operating status. For instance, you're changing it from operating to temporarily shut down, or from something to operating. This is a place where SLEIS conditionally requires you to report a status date. Now, every state other than operating requires a date. However, once you've reported something as not operating and wish to go back to operating, it's always best to include a status date. Although you are presented with a calendar of dates here and the ability to select any day throughout the year, you will always want to choose January 1st of that reporting year. This indicates to us that for this entire year, this release point was temporarily shut down. It had no operations. If any of you are needing to report a partial year inventory, you would maintain the operating status for the entire year if you're going to include a year because you were previously temporarily shut down, or without a year because you've never previously reported it as temporarily shut down. And then the following reporting cycle, you would then go in and select temporary or permanently shut down or temporarily shut down and give us a date for that period. Oh, too far. That's very important. Now this occurs at release points, control devices, and emission units. Keep that in mind when changing your operating statuses. Control devices, I'm going to come back to control devices because they're probably the most complicated thing with the biggest difference for all users, regardless of who you are, compared to how it is now in SLEIS and what existed previously in Redbud. You can see that almost all of these I created. For example, this top control device is one that was carried over from Redbud in its data structure. And I want to go over this to show you a little bit so you can more easily understand what you see, what appears to you when you open up SLEIS. To begin, you have the identifier. No identifiers previously existed. These were just attributes attached to a pollutant, so we assigned everything an identifier. The next is the name. Now, obviously, you may have a name for this, but we have no idea what it was because we never had it. What we populated the field description with was the type of device it was, the catalytic converter, then whether this was listed as the first device or the second device for that pollutant. So here it was the primary. Next is the capture efficiency for that device at that pollutant, and then the controlled efficiency for that device at that pollutant. When you log into SLEIS for your first cycle of reporting, everyone is going to have to go into control devices and do cleanup there if you have any devices at all. You may find that you have more devices than you actually need. You may find you have less devices than you actually need. It would be really cool if you found out you had exactly the amount of devices which you need. I don't know if that's going to happen or not because this is such a difference. We found the safest middle ground for everyone that there was. However, that requires work for everyone at the same time. If I go in here, I can see that it has a description. You can change this description to anything you wish. We've simply pre-populated it to help you understand the information. You can change the status. You can change the efficiencies, whatever you need to do. Again, if you find some values in here that are really wonky, like I don't know, 1.67, some crazy number for controlled pollutant device efficiency. That's because that's the information that was given to us by the reporters. There wasn't a great quality assurance mechanism in Redbud for these values, so they're kind of all over the place in some cases. Another thing, emission units. Emission units are really easy. Another thing is for unit processes. because processes can be excuse me, hold on one second, make sure I'm in the right spot. Because processes can be routed to multiple devices, release points. Whenever you have that case, you need to go in and indicate this process is being routed to multiple release points and at what percentage is going to those release points. In this scenario, someone went in and said, hey, we used to have one exhaust vent, and we found out it was too small, so we just added another one instead of making the first one bigger. I was like, okay, fine, whatever, 50-50. Just made up example. There are going to be cases, well, I should rephrase that. In every case where you have a process with more than one release point, that will not be reflected in SLEIS because there was no way to indicate that in Redbud other than through like strange comments that people would give us on occasion. So right now, every process should be going to a singular release point. That can be changed as you need. The last thing, and I don't have a good way to display this here, is with control devices, because they existed at pollutants, which were children of a process that existed in an emission unit, you may have indicated that you have, I don't know, a bag house at a certain process that had the exact same capture efficiency and control efficiency as a bag house you had at a different process, as a bag house as you had at a different process. Because control devices are equipment that exists at a facility, all of those control devices may have been aggregated together to exist as a singular control device because their values of name, whether it was the first or second control device for the pollutant, capture, and then control efficiency were all identical. Conversely, if you have one control device and you showed these values being significantly varied across a lot of processes, then you may have multiple control devices where you only have one. So again, you'll need to pay attention to that and clean up that information carefully. I think I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any questions, and if not, I'm going to go ahead and submit. All right, so once you've done all of your reporting, I think I did, let me make sure. Well, I have no idea, I could just check when I validate. So once you've done all your reporting and you think you're good to go, you can come down here where it has more actions and click Validate Report. That will give you feedback, apparently really quick, on any errors that you might have within your report. Here it's a CSV file that's given to you on screen. You can open it up and, oh, I made a mistake. What did I do? Probably didn't even go. So it's saying I need to give information at this process, 311336. If I navigate back, that was the second process that we didn't go into and make any edits to. So I am going to say, hey, I did my math and I went and checked everything, and it doesn't need to be reported this year. If I do, it's going to gray everything out. Now, don't just do this without doing due diligence. I'm doing it for the sake of demonstration. But once you're done, you come back, you can validate your report again. And sometimes what will happen is, because you've changed information, it's going to give you a different set of validation errors. See, I couldn't cheat that much. Oh, where was it? That one's still temporarily shut down. Oh yeah, I forgot to do that completely. Didn't hit save, did I? check that box. It says, yeah, this is real. You have to give it a comment. Yeah, this is fake. So then once you've gone through all your validation errors, you should be ready to submit. Now within the application, when you do all this stuff on screen, it says, hey, you're great. Now mark as ready for submission, which is over here on the lower right. Once you click this box, it's going to change the status that appears to users to ready for submission. Nothing appears on this screen that's any different, but it will on. Should be right there. Oh well, am I wrong? So I am a submitter for this facility. Administrator editor, yeah, good, I am. And when I come in and initiate the submission, it will happen on screen. If I have not yet validated the report, it will still force it through validation. I can view the electronic document. This is the copy of record and how it will appear. So this is not the right document for some reason. It's missing the header. It should have, this all will appear in your documents. There will also be a first cover page that has the information that you just, oh no, wait, I'm totally off. Give me a second. I haven't submitted yet. Okay, sorry, trying to remember where I'm at. You view the electronic document, yeah. You view the electronic document, you take a view of what you're about to submit, looking over that information, saying, you can print this off if you want. It's just the information that's in the database at this time. After you viewed it, you hit continue, then you agree to these wonderful things, and then you hit continue. At that point, it will give you a confirmation that you can print, and you can then view the official copy of record. This is the document I thought I was looking at a second ago, but I wasn't. On this page, you will find a signature page with your agreements, that it was signed, and then all of the information here. Now, if you remember, I mentioned earlier that confidential business information does not show up in these. So let's check. Down at the process, you can see that, did I click it? I can't remember. This is fake. You don't think I clicked it? Can't remember either. Nope, I didn't click it. Sorry. Anyway, if you selected that, the emission factor value would be redacted. I believe the throughput would also be redacted, and some of this information here. Now, once you've submitted, congratulations, you're done. We're gonna get some information. It'll kick up over here. We do some stuff with it. But let's pretend, oh no, you made a mistake and you need to fix it. Within SLEIS, once you submit, you're done. You have submitted. It's not like in Redbud where you can submit again and again and again and again and again. It's just one time and you're done. Now, if you find you've made mistakes, all amendments will be done through SLEIS, and you can request an amendment. The link for that is on the lower right-hand side of the screen. If I submit a request, I got to give a reason. Didn't do CBI. Let's not see. Hit submit. Emissions inventory will get this request with the information you've sent them. We'll review it and then either enable or deny your amendment capability. Now, when you submit an amendment, when you are actually doing an amendment, there's certain information you're supposed to give us about your request. You need to tell us why you're making the amendment request. If you're going to be amending information across years, for instance, you're going to be adding a piece of equipment to 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017 because it was left off of multiple years. And some other information that I think emissions inventory has some guidance that's going to be coming out.
Other information would be if there's an open enforcement case or as a result of an inspection or just an internal company audit or quality control from emissions inventory staff.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. And also, once you've submitted, that screen pops up giving you the ability to print out a confirmation or obtain a copy of record. Once you close that screen, you can navigate to your prior submission for this facility at this link on the right, and you can download that. It will show you every submission you've made, which is basically your original submission and any amendment that occurs over time. If I were to go back and show you for this facility in 2018, it's been submitted 3 times and it would appear like this. Each one of them has a date with confirmation number and who submitted it.
I've got some questions in. One is, can you validate at the company level or does it have to be at the facility level?
You can do it at the company level, and we will cover that in our next webinar. I just haven't covered it here today.
Another question is, can you submit everything at once from the company or does it have to be at the facility level? Again, that will be, we'll go through that in our next webinar about bulk submissions and bulk uploading of information because, yes, SLEIS has the ability to do things for multiple facilities at once. It doesn't even have to be all of the facilities. You can do a subset if you want. Next question, can you submit multiple facilities at the same time? Yes. Also, only the company is allowed submittal rights, correct? So we went over that in our first webinar on who can get what roles there are in SLEIS, and furthermore, this person asks a consultant isn't allowed to submit. And yes, that is correct. Only the responsible official will be given a submitter role, and that would be somebody at the company, of course, that falls under that definition of responsible official. Next question, in what cases would an amendment request be denied? We would, if we had any questions, if we got in a request and it didn't have all of the information in it, we would email you to get more information. The only situation I can think of where it would be denied is if it was a mistake. You didn't mean to request an amendment. Otherwise, we would just try to gather more information to make sure you are wanting to do an amendment and that some other action doesn't suffice for your situation. Last question right now, who is authorized to sign? Same as in the previous years. Yes, so that was covered in the first webinar, and that would be the responsible official who has submitter role in SLEIS.
So that concludes my part of the demonstration. I think there is a little bit more Carrie would like to go over, so let me log out of this real quick and see if there are any remaining questions.
Amendments will now be completed fully within SLEIS. We don't have the turnaround documents to do a hard copy amendment. Hopefully you'll like this. It should be quicker. It's paperless. We get it in quickly, and as I mentioned and as Josh said, if you're requesting an amendment, describe why you wish to make it, whether it resulted from an inspection or an enforcement request, whether it was a company audit, if you sent in a self-disclosure, and whether you are adding equipment. That's actually pretty important if you're adding equipment, because we need to make sure that unique ID for that piece of equipment is the same in all of the years that you're adding it to. We don't want to have different IDs for the same piece of equipment. You don't want 3 of the same thing because you amended 3 years worth. We want that same unique ID in all 3 years. Release points, the fugitive parameters are different than you're used to in Redbud. We used to collect the height and the area in square feet, and now it's reported as length and width and angle, as well as the height. Control devices are unique objects within SLEIS. They're not, as you saw from Josh's demonstration, it's not an attribute of a pollutant record. They are separate altogether, and it would be best if you reviewed all of the control devices that you have in there right now and the connections that we made to processes. You may find that there are too many devices or too few of devices for your situation. And one of the questions we got in earlier about, well, if you have an oxidation catalyst at each engine at the facility, should there only be one device or should there be multiple devices? That may be a result of that person already going into SLEIS and seeing that it was incorrect, where there was only one device for all of their facility, when they really need a device at each engine. Another key takeaway, calculation methods have changed, and methods conditionally require different information for each type. If it's looking up an AP42 factor or a formula, it's going to look in different fields of data to gather what it needs to calculate those emissions. And the last takeaway, deletions. SLEIS enables users to delete records under various circumstances. As Josh demonstrated, if you haven't submitted yet and you added something incorrectly, then it's pretty easy for you to go in and delete it. If you submit it, then you can't really delete it, but you can set it to permanently shut down with a last year of emissions. So that is all we have today. I think we're right on time, which is pretty good. And our email address, if you have another question, you can email us at aei@deq.ok.gov. You can also call and ask for emissions inventory staff. The next webinar will be at 1:30 on Wednesday afternoon, and we hope to see you back, because I think a lot of you are going to be interested in the bulk function, the template use function in SLEIS, where you can fill out your data for multiple facilities and submit multiple facilities at once. Are there any last questions? Nope, I'm not seeing any, so thank you for coming today. If you have any more questions, just send us an email or call us. And again, this is being recorded, and we will post it as soon as we can. The first webinar has already been posted to the website, so if you missed that, you can go check it out. And that was about the SLEIS user roles. Thank you.